The typical American household carries a net worth of $192,000. That figure represents the exact midpoint. Half of every household in this nation falls below that line. You could own a fully paid off sedan, a completely funded Roth IRA, and absolutely nothing else. And you would still rank higher in net worth than approximately 50 million American families. And yet, the vast majority of people watching this right now genuinely believe they are falling behind. Not slightly behind, but meaningfully, anxiously, stressfully behind. According to Pew Research, somewhere between 83 and 84% of Americans describe themselves as either not at all wealthy or only a little bit wealthy. 83%. That includes a significant number of people who, by objective measurement, own the majority of wealth in this country. Something is fundamentally broken in how we evaluate this, and the problem isn't the arithmetic, it's the measuring stick. I'm going to walk you through three specific indicators that your net worth already sits in the top 10% of American households, or is approaching that mark faster than you realize. And I'm going to explain why you can't feel it. Not because you're inattentive, but because the instruments being used to evaluate your financial standing have been deliberately calibrated to make you feel inadequate. The third indicator is the one that should genuinely unsettle you. Stay with me. Let me establish what we're actually working with. According to the most recent Federal Reserve survey of consumer finances, confirmed by a Visa analysis of 2024 census data, the entry point for the top 10% of American households by net worth lands at approximately $1.8 to $1.9 million. Not $10 million. Not $5 million. $1.8 million. That threshold climbed from roughly $1.3 million in 2020, driven almost entirely by escalating home values in a bull market in equities that dominated most of the decade. According to the Federal Reserve's own figures, the top 10% of households watched their wealth expand by approximately 40% over the past 5 years as asset prices surged. 40%. Not because they worked 40% harder, because they held assets. That figure, $1.9 million, is the measuring stick I'm handing you today. Your job is to hold it up against your own situation honestly, probably for the very first time. There's someone I'll refer to as Marcus. He's 47, a senior software engineer based in Columbus, Ohio, earning about $112,000 annually. He thinks of himself as solidly middle class. He comes to mind because he represents tens of millions of Americans in their 40s and early 50s who have been steadily accumulating wealth for 15 years, done nothing particularly remarkable, and have no clear sense of where they actually stand. I'll return to Marcus. His numbers are going to produce a surprising result by the end of this. But first, let's construct a framework. A few minutes from now, I'll show you why the number most Americans associate with the wealthy threshold sits 25% above the real top 10% cutoff. And that single discrepancy is costing people something far more valuable than money. But first, let me show you why most people have never correctly tallied their own net worth. Indicator number 1. You haven't done the actual calculation. I don't mean you haven't thought about it casually. I mean, almost nobody performs the complete computation. When most people try to estimate their financial position, they consider their checking account, perhaps their brokerage account, maybe a savings balance. What they nearly universally leave out, and this is far from a minor oversight, is home equity. Home equity is essentially invisible. It doesn't appear on any financial app. It generates no income. It never appears on a bank statement. And for exactly those reasons, the human brain tends to heavily discount it or forget it entirely during any kind of mental accounting exercise. The psychological research on this point is consistent and clear. Money that cannot be accessed easily gets cognitively categorized as less real. So, the $250,000 locked inside your home registers as almost nothing in your internal wealth calculation, while the $3,000 sitting in your checking account feels like nearly everything. Here's why this matters specifically right now in 2026 in ways that simply weren't true 5 years ago. According to a bank rate analysis using Zillow home value data and Experian mortgage balance data, average home equity has surged 142% nationwide since 2020. 142%. And as of early 2026, the average mortgaged homeowner, someone who still carries a mortgage rather than owning their property outright, is sitting on approximately $299,000 in accumulated home equity, according to totality data. That is nearly a third of $1 million for the average mortgage-carrying American. Not the wealthy, the average. Zillow's own analysis concluded that U.S. home values climbed 45.3% between February 2020 and February 2025, packing, as they described it, more than a decade's worth of typical appreciation into just 5 years. Think carefully about what that compressed timeline meant for anyone who purchased a home before 2022 with a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage. They captured the appreciation without any corresponding increase in their monthly payment. That is an enormous passive transfer of wealth, and most of the people who received it have not registered it as wealth at all. Now add the 401k and do it properly this time. According to Fidelity's Q3 2025 retirement analysis, drawing from data across 26,000 corporate defined contribution plans covering roughly 25 million participants, the average 401k balance for Gen X, those born between 1965 and 1980, sits at $215,600. For baby boomers, that figure is $260,300. These are averages pulled upward by high earners. The medians run lower. But if you have been contributing consistently for more than a decade with any employer match at all, you are very likely sitting above the median for your age group on this particular measure. Now I want you to work through a simple addition problem that most financial planners never actually walk people through. Take your home equity, say conservatively $200,000, add your 401k balance, say $200,000, again conservative for someone in their mid-40s with a history of regular contributions. Add any taxable brokerage accounts, perhaps $40,000. Add your savings balance, $20,000. Subtract your remaining debts beyond the mortgage, maybe $30,000 covering a car payment and a lingering credit card balance. You land at $430,000 in net worth. You feel completely, thoroughly, unambiguously middle class. But you are sitting in the 75th to 75th percentile of American household net worth. The median net worth across all households is $192,000. You are more than double that figure. Empowers January 2026. Data tracking millions of real-world users puts the average net worth for people in their 50s at approximately $1.36 million. But the median sits at only around $180,000, meaning half of all households in their 50s hold less than that. If you have $400,000 saved, you are ahead of more than half of your entire age cohort. The invisible balance sheet has been working in your favor all along, and you haven't been reading the statements. This is the wrong measuring stick operating in real time. You're evaluating your wealth using the cash balance your brain recognizes as tangible, while the actual Federal Reserve definition of net worth encompasses everything. Equity, retirement assets, all of it. And when you apply the correct ruler, the number is considerably larger than you imagined. Hold on to that, because the second indicator is where things become genuinely disorienting. Stay with me through this next section because it explains something about how the past 5 years unfolded that almost nobody discusses with any real clarity. Indicator number 2. Your wealth has been expanding passively without your active involvement, at a rate most people would attribute only to high earners. Let me be precise about what happened between 2020 and 2025, so this doesn't remain abstract. The S&P 500 gained roughly 109% across that 5-year span, according to CNBC data. That means a $50,000 index fund position held in early 2020 grew to approximately $104,000 by early 2025. A $100,000 position became approximately $209,000. You didn't earn this money through effort. You didn't negotiate for it. You didn't optimize your way to it. You held an asset, and the asset grew in value. The Federal Reserve's own figures from Q2 2025 show that total household net worth increased by $7.1 trillion in a single quarter. $7.1 trillion. The engine driving that increase was gains in corporate equity and real estate, not wages, not performance bonuses, not pay raises. And here is the uncomfortable counterpoint embedded in this fact. The top 10% of households who, per Federal Reserve data from Q4 2024, hold 67.2% of all household wealth in the United States, captured the majority of those gains. Not because they are more intelligent, because they hold more assets. Specifically, they hold more equities and more real estate. The assets that appreciated the most are the assets that the top 10% owned the most of. If you have been steadily funding a 401k for 15 years and you own a home purchased before 2022, you are an asset holder. The game doesn't feel like it shifted for you because your paycheck didn't shift. Your lifestyle didn't visibly change. But your balance sheet changed dramatically. And the mechanism that drove it, asset appreciation, is the same one that generates wealth at every level. Fidelity conducted an analysis of this dynamic that deserves far wider attention. They examined 401k participants from 2022 through 2025 who started with a balance of $100,000. Those who stayed fully invested in stocks, continued contributing, and rebalanced annually finished the 3-year period with $191,463. Those who panicked, shifted to cash, and stopped contributing finished with $105,500 or $86. Same starting balance, same time period. The difference, $85,877, produced simply by staying put. You probably stayed put. You probably didn't obsessively monitor your account during the volatile quarters because checking the balance made you anxious. And that mild reluctance to look at your own account may have been the most financially constructive thing you did in the past 3 years. Here's the reversal that actually matters. You think the problem is that your income isn't high enough. That is the wrong frame entirely. The real issue is that the most powerful engine of wealth accumulation in your life, passive asset appreciation, doesn't register psychologically as earnings, so it doesn't register as forward progress. Your brain monitors income closely. It does not track asset appreciation with anything approaching the same intensity. You are running a race and someone has been adding to your distance for 5 years while you were distracted by other things, and you haven't once glanced at the scoreboard. This is where conventional retirement advice consistently fails people, by the way, because understanding your current financial position and knowing exactly what to do with it across the next 20 years are entirely different problems. One is data. The other is a functioning system. Knowing these numbers and constructing a plan around them are two completely separate undertakings. A consistent theme among people who occupy the top 10% by net worth is that they arrived there not through superior investment selection, but because they had a structured plan for the withdrawal phase of their financial lives, the part most people never think about until it's already too late. A well-built framework for this challenge would address 2 things directly relevant to what we've been discussing. A low-cost, broadly diversified portfolio approach historically structured to outperform active trading strategies across 30-year windows, built around consistent index exposure with disciplined rebalancing. And a dynamic withdrawal method, a mathematically grounded alternative to the standard 4% rule that genuinely accounts for the sequence of returns risk that exists when retirement assets are held in equities. If you've been accumulating assets for a decade or more and haven't pressure tested your exit against a real 50-year data model, you are improvising. Now let me show you the third indicator because this is the one that explains the first 2. Indicator number 3, the benchmark you've been measuring yourself against is wrong, not slightly miscalibrated. Wrong by design. Here's the number. Charles Schwab publishes an annual study called the Modern Wealth Survey, a large nationally representative examination of American financial attitudes and perceptions. The 2025 edition found that Americans believe a net worth of approximately $2.3 million is required to be considered wealthy. This figure has shifted over time. It was $2.2 million in 2022. It climbed to $2.5 million in 2024. And in 2025, it pulled back slightly to $2.3 million. Notice what is happening. The perceived wealth threshold is not tracking real data. It is tracking social anxiety. It moves with sentiment, not with statistics. Here is the actual figure from the Federal Reserve. The top 10% threshold sits at approximately $1.8 to $1.9 million in net worth nationally. According to both the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances and Visa's analysis of 2024 census data, that is a gap of $400,000 to $500,000. You have been measuring yourself against a number that is roughly 25% above the actual entry point for the tier you've been trying to reach every single time. The Schwab figure is a perception number. It captures what people imagine wealthy feels like, not what the data confirms wealth actually is. And the perception number is consistently and structurally inflated relative to the real statistical threshold. This has concrete consequences. If you have accumulated $1.5 million in household net worth, you are sitting at approximately the 92nd percentile of American household wealth by Federal Reserve math. But the Schwab number tells you that you're $800,000 short of wealthy. So you feel behind, you feel like you've worked hard but haven't actually arrived anywhere. You redouble your effort, extend your working years, and decline to recalibrate your understanding of where you stand. The wrong ruler works precisely as designed. A fortune analysis from April 2026 captured this with unusual directness. The United States, they argued, has grown so wealthy so rapidly that it has lost the capacity to recognize its own prosperity. The piece cited a McKinsey Global Institute analysis showing that in terms of GDP, the world of 2025 is 24 times larger than the world of 1925. Median family income, adjusted for inflation and shrinking family size, rose 52% between 1979 and 2024. But the average American's subjective experience of this wealth accumulation appears to hover near zero. Here is why the Schwab number keeps drifting upward. As the upper middle class expands in size, it floods the markets for housing, elite education, premium travel, and luxury goods, inflating the price of everything associated with a wealthy lifestyle. So, the price tag attached to the wealthy reference class keeps rising even when the statistical threshold does not. You are not measuring yourself against a fixed target. You are measuring yourself against a shifting social reference point. That is a competition you structurally cannot win. The wrong ruler is not an accident. It emerges from the convergence of social media, lifestyle advertising, and the financial services industry's commercial interest in you, feeling insufficiently capitalized. Someone who feels financially inadequate purchases more products, more advice, more protection. The system is optimized to generate a persistent sense of deficit, regardless of your objective financial position. Let me return to Marcus now. Marcus, 47, Columbus, Ohio, senior software engineer. He purchased his home in 2018 for $330,000. He put 20% down. His outstanding mortgage balance sits at approximately $192,000. Home values in Columbus have appreciated meaningfully since 2018, placing his current estimated market value at around $460,000 on a conservative basis. Home equity, $268,000. His 401k, funded consistently since his late 20s with a 4% employer match, $340,000. He has a taxable brokerage account he opened during the early pandemic period, invested in index funds. He made a single investment decision and has not touched it since. Current value, approximately $52,000. He holds $22,000 in a high-yield savings account. His car is paid off and carries a value of roughly $15,000. His student loans were cleared at age 35. His only remaining debt is the mortgage. Total assets, $268,000 in home equity, plus $340,000 in his 401k, plus $52,000 in the brokerage account, plus $22,000 in savings, plus $15,000 in vehicle value. Total net worth, $697,000. His college roommate lives in San Francisco and owns a home valued at $2 million. Marcus has concluded from the property and the wine collection that this represents genuine wealth, and that Marcus himself is nowhere close to it. His other former roommate works in private equity in New York and rarely discusses money. But Marcus infers from the watch collection and the vacation post on social media that this person inhabits an entirely different financial universe. Marcus is benchmarking himself against two individuals, one in San Francisco, one in Manhattan, in two of the most expensive asset-inflated real estate markets in the entire country, both working in fields that place them squarely in the top 1 to 2% of earners nationally. These two people do not represent the top 10% benchmark. They represent statistical outliers Marcus has selected as his reference class. Marcus's $697,000 net worth places him above the median for his age bracket. He has not yet crossed the top 10% threshold nationally, but here is the forward-looking math. His 401k compounds without any additional action on his part. His home equity, even growing only modestly by historical standards, generates passive gains. If he contributes $20,000 annually to his retirement and brokerage accounts, and those assets grow at a conservative 7% annually, his net worth in 7 years will land somewhere between $1.3 and $1.5 million, potentially crossing the top. 10% threshold within a single decade with no change to his current behavior. He feels none of this. He feels middle class. He is using the wrong ruler. Now here's the core point. The three indicators I've walked you through, the invisible balance sheet, the silent compounding engine, the inflated benchmark, all point toward the same structural diagnosis. This is not a math problem. It has never been a math problem. It is a measurement problem rooted in psychology. The reason financial anxiety persists even as objective wealth increases is not that the numbers are insufficient. It's that the reference class keeps expanding faster than the portfolio does. As income rises, social circles shift. As the neighborhood improves, the neighbors own larger homes. As careers advance, the comparison becomes the colleague who made partner 2 years earlier, the contact who sold a startup, the family member who retired at 58 with a boat. You are on a socio-economic treadmill, and the speed of that treadmill is determined by your reference class, not by the Federal Reserve. And since most people's reference class is wealthier than the national median, because successful people cluster geographically, professionally, and socially, the median American carrying $400,000 in net worth is perpetually convinced they are trailing the people they can see, while remaining significantly ahead of the people they cannot see. A 2024 Premia survey found that 65% of middle-income Americans report feeling financially stressed. These are households that own homes with $200,000 to $300,000 in equity, fund retirement accounts regularly, and own their vehicles outright. 83% of Americans broadly report not feeling particularly wealthy. The math and the subjective experience are completely disconnected from one another. Picture a marathon runner who crosses the finish line, collects their medal, and then spends the next hour convinced they didn't actually run a marathon because the other people at the finish line also ran marathons. The event occurred. The distance was covered. The measurement is not in dispute. The feeling is the malfunction. Here is what to do with all of this. 3 takeaways specific to this problem. First, calculate your actual net worth this week, not a mental accounting approximation. Go through every account, every asset, every piece of equity you hold. Get the current estimated market value of your home from Zillow or Redfin. These tools are imprecise but directionally accurate enough. Subtract your remaining mortgage balance. The result is your home equity. Add that figure to everything else. Write the final number down. Most people discover when they complete this exercise honestly for the first time in years that the number is 30 to 50% higher than their instinctive estimate, Because home equity and retirement account balances are the assets most consistently excluded from informal mental accounting. Second, replace the Schwab survey figure in your head with the Federal Reserve figure. The actual top 10% threshold is $1.8 to $1.9 million, not $2.3 million, not $2.5 million, $1.8 million. That is your measuring stick. Use it. If you are within $500,000 of that number, and you are in your 40s or 50s, you are approaching a threshold that the majority of people in this country will never reach, and you are almost certainly further along than your daily financial anxiety suggests. Third, stop treating passive asset appreciation as categorically different from earned income. It is not different. Your equity gains are real. Your 401k growth is real. Your index fund appreciation is real. The fact that you did not exchange your time directly for these dollars does not make them any less yours. The wealthiest households in America understand this instinctively. They structure their entire financial lives around asset accumulation precisely because they recognize that the return on assets across a 30-year horizon systematically outpaces the return on labor. You have been doing this already. You simply haven't been giving yourself credit for it. The top 10% is not a lifestyle category, it is a balance sheet position. You can carry a car payment, pay school tuition, and have a bathroom renovation sitting on your to-do list for 3 years and still occupy the top 10%. The luxury car in the driveway is not the signal. The balance sheet is. Patient, low-cost, broadly diversified investing built more lasting wealth than speculative trends ever will.